Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hey, hi, hello, and welcome back to the paddock. Today we're covering another Formula One feeder series, Formula 3. In today's episode, we have Hannah, Casey, Melissa, and myself, Amy. Yes, I am behind the scenes today. I'm going to hand it off to Hannah to kick us off with some background on what Formula 3 is.
So, 2019 marked the launch of the FIA Formula 3 Championship, an ambitious new project from the FIA and the former GP3 Series organization to form an official third line of the road to the F1 ladder. So, this ended up combining the GP3 European, GP3 Asia Series, and others into one racing series market. So, kind of basically combining talent from across the world. Designed as the perfect training ground for both F2 and ultimately F1. Their young drivers must showcase their skills both in speed and in tire management, just like they will have to do when they move up the motorsports ladder. The various championships are held in Europe, Australia, South America, and Asia. Formula 3 consists of 30 drivers, with 3 drivers per team, making up 10 teams total, but Melissa will dive into that further later. So, the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Saloom, stated this: the FIA Formula 3 Championship represents a key moment in the careers of young racing talents, as for the first time in their careers, they actually have the opportunity to race at the same events as the top levels of world motorsports. The FIA Formula 1 Championship and showcasing their talents in front of racing's key players, so some of the top teams. So 30 drivers have already actually made the jump from F3 to F2. And as for the 2023 season, and as we continue further, we look forward to watching the latest class of drivers battle it out on the track and see who stays next year. So, to name some of the drivers that came from F3 who have actually made it to F1 would be Oscar Piastri himself, along with Yuki Tsunoda, and current driver in F2, Dennis Hauger. And now on to talk about the weekend schedule and point system.
So, by now, I imagine you're wondering what a race weekend looks like for these drivers. First, on Friday, the teams have one practice session that's 45 minutes long, followed by one qualifying session that lasts for 30 minutes. To me, Saturday is a fun day out of the weekend because first, there's one sprint race of 40 minutes plus one lap. The starting grid for the sprint is determined by flipping the top 12 finishers from the qualifying session from Friday. So this means whoever was P12 on Friday, or in this case, Sunday for race day, would be P1 for the sprint on Saturday, P11 to P2, P10 to P3, so on and so forth. On race day, Sunday, the race takes place before the F1 race and will last about 45 minutes plus one lap. The score system for Sunday's race is similar to F1's point system. They reward points to the top 10 finishers of the day. As for the sprint race, the driver that finishes in P1 is awarded 10 points, P2, 9 points, P3, 8 points, P4, 7 points, and so on. Also, the driver who qualified in P1 from the Friday session also is awarded with 2 additional points. Like in F1 and F3, 1 additional point goes to the driver that got the fastest lap, so long that they finish in the top 10 at the end of the race, or else it wouldn't count. A countback system is used in F3 to decide the places of the drivers who are tied in the championship. For example, if 2 drivers are tied, let's say for first or second place, the driver with the most wins between the 2 ranks higher.
And now you're wondering where you may be able to watch these F3 races. So you can watch F3 actually on the F1 TV app if you have it. But in many other countries, there are actual sport channels that you can watch it on. So I'm just going to name a few in North America slash South America. So in Brazil, you can watch it on Band Sports, Canada, Bell Media, Mexico, Fox Sports. Now, actual USA does not have a designated sports channel that does air it, but you can watch it on the F1 TV app, just like I mentioned. I highly recommend to see where you can watch it F3 in your local place, so like in England and all that, because there are a lot of channels. And many of these drivers, you can actually watch them from the start of their career and potentially develop into the big leagues of F1 and so on, maybe Formula E, IndyCar, you never know. So if you're interested in seeing someone grow up and develop as a driver, highly recommend.
I do want to add on F1 TV is a great app to subscribe to because you get access to like so much besides just F1, F2, and F3. It's just like all these behind the scenes stuff, tech stuff. It's really worth it, like that yearly subscription. So, highly recommend. But, anyways, like Hannah had told you guys, in Formula 3, there are 10 teams with 3 drivers to each team. So, let's go over them. And I'm just going to apologize in advance because I already know I'm going to butcher some of these drivers' names, and they have some very lovely names. But we'll see how this goes. So first we have Prema Racing. We have driving for them Paul Aaron, Dino Beganovic, and Zach O'Sullivan. I'm so sorry for that one. Next we have Trident with Leonardo Formaroli, Gabriel Bortoletto, and Oliver Gautier. Following we have Art Grand Prix with Kaylin Frederick, Gregory Saucy, and Nicola Tsolf. Next, MP Motorsport with Franco Colapinto, Mari Boya, and Johnny Edgar. And then we have High Tech Plus 8 with Sebastian Montoya, Gabriele Mini, and Luke Browning.
And I'm honestly going to piggyback off of what Melissa say and say I apologize in advance if I butcher any of these names. So to move on, we have Van Amersfoort Racing with Charles Colette, Rafael Vidal-Gomez, and Tommy Smith. And then on Brody Carlin, we have Oliver Gray, Francesco Simonazzi, and Ido Cohen. And then we have Campos Racing with Joseph Maria Mati, Christian Menzel, and Joshua Dufek. We have Genser Motorsports with Nikita Bendrin, Taylor Barnard, and Alejandro Garcia. And then lastly, but not least, we have PHM Racing by Coros with Sofia Florinch, Roberto Ferreri, and Wuhan Sheen.
So, like in all the other levels in motorsport, at the end of the season, we also have our postseason testing with F3, which looks like this. From October 5th through the 6th, they are testing in Jerez, Spain, followed by October 10th through the 11th in Barcelona, and then finally October 23rd through the 24th in Imola, Italy.
And the F3 season actually just ended in Monza this past weekend, and Gabriel Bortoletto is the 2023 F3 champion with 164 points. So this was actually his rookie year in F3, so he is a rookie champion, and he actually won after like the qualifying session, not any of the actual races, because his 2 rivals in the championship failed to get pole after a very chaotic qualifying session. And with pole comes those 2 extra points. And since they didn't get the 2 points, it was impossible for them to be able to overtake Gabriel in the championship. And so he was crowned champion in the pit lane. After the qualifying session was decided it wouldn't be resumed. He had a very impressive season. So hopefully we will see him somewhere in F2 next year. And he currently doesn't belong to any of the, F1 Driver Academy things that they have going on, but he is a part of Fernando Alonso's management company. So perhaps we will see more from him in the future. Second place was Zach O'Sullivan with 119 points, and third place was Paul Aaron with 112 points.
I just want to say I found out about Fernando Alonso's management company on this call. And I'm very intrigued to figure out more about what that is because what the heck? How did I never know this? I like Fernando.
Well, for those who don't know, he also has a karting school. He kind of just does it all with motorsport, I feel like. So it's actually called A14 Management, and it's kind of a new thing. But if you noticed at the very beginning of the season, I believe in Bahrain, because they had the F3 there, he was cheering on his little younglings at the race. And he's really involved. I think some of his drivers have talked about he'll send them 10-minute WhatsApp memos and talk to them all the time and give them advice. The grid dad, but not for F1 drivers. I mean, he is for F1 drivers, but for all the little
young drivers too. So, and it's like a new thing. And I know like each of one of the F1 teams has to have like a driving academy. So with Fernando Alonso at Aston Martin, who knows? Perhaps Gabriel will go to the Aston Martin driver academy with Felipe Drugovich, both Brazilian. Who knows?
You mentioned Fernando like sending them like little audio messages on WhatsApp, and all I could picture was just like a Hispanic dad just like recording like nonsense, but also like the most motivating thing before like any big like event, in this case race and all that stuff. Like just like being like, I know like you can do it. Make sure you do like X, Y, and Z, and then like trail off into like a totally different subject, and then ending and be like, okay, well I'll see you at the end. Like I know you'll kill it. Bye. It's just it came to mind.
I absolutely love that, and I absolutely love learning more things that never would have thought existed until now, and just gives me more of a reason to learn more and follow through with it. But to continue on, we're going to talk about our Constructor Championship. So, Premo Racing won the Constructors Championship with 327 points. So, they successfully defended their title since they won it last year, actually, too. Second place is Trident Motorsports with 306 points, and third place with MP Motorsports with 194 points. So, good job, everybody.
So, as Formula 3 is one of the feeder series in the Formula ladder, I guess, there are some similarities between F2 and F1, but there's also some differences. And one of the most visible differences between F3 and the others is just the number of drivers that are on the grid. So, as Hannah mentioned earlier, there are 3 drivers per team instead of the typical 2, which means to a much larger grid size, which is great because it provides more opportunity for young talent. But, like, if you thought, an F1 race was crowded with those cars, like, there's just so many more drivers in F3. And so it is a spec series like F2 in that, all of the teams have to use kind of the same car, same engine, but it is a little bit different regarding the actual specifics. So all teams must use a bespoke Mechachrome 6-cylinder 3.4-liter naturally aspirated engine with 380 horsepower at 8,000 RPM. And so naturally aspirated means that the engine is taking in air at atmospheric pressure. So, normal air just that's out there versus turbocharger, like an F2 or F1. So that's kind of like one of the big differences with the engine kind of powertrain system. And F3 also uses specialized fuel for sustainability from a single supplier, but the fuel is actually comparable to the type of fuel that you can just get from a regular gas pump. It's from the same source for all the teams, and then it's just more sustainable, as that is the goal. And then F3 cars have a max speed of 300 kph, which is about 186 miles per hour, and which is still pretty fast, but it is slower than F2 and F1. There are also specific chassis requirements, and while a single supplier is not mandated, a majority of the teams use the Dallara F3 2019 chassis. And so the car itself can have a max width of 45.3 inches, but a minimum track, which is the distance between kind of the center point on each wheel on like the same axis. So that distance there of 47 inches. And then there's a minimum wheelbase, which is the distance between the front and the back axle of 79 inches, and a minimum weight, including the driver, of 550 kilograms. So compared to F2, F2 has a wheelbase of 123 inches, and it has a minimum weight of 788 kilograms. So the F2 cars are bigger and heavier than the F3 cars. And the F3 cars are a little bit more maneuverable because they're smaller and they weigh a lot less, which honestly comes in handy because the grid size is so much bigger. Another similarity between all of the series is that F3 cars are also equipped with the Halo device to help protect the driver. And of course, they use Pirelli tires.
And now that we've talked about the roundup of the 2023 season, let's talk about what the 2024 season is going to bring. What does the calendar look like for next year? And maybe some early predictions on who will stay with Formula 3 for another year and who potentially is going to move into Formula 2 or not with the Formula series at all. So let's go ahead and get started with Formula Three's calendar. So, as I just mentioned, the Formula 3 calendar has been released. They will be doing 14 rounds, with 10 of those rounds actually being with Formula 2 and Formula 1 themselves. So, even more reason for them to like showcase their skills in front of like the key teams for future development. What do y'all think?
So it sounds like some races next year are actually going to be pretty packed with racing activity because I believe F1 Academy is also going to be racing with like the F1 on the F1 weekends as well. So, I mean, you're definitely getting the bang for the buck when it comes to tickets, I guess, if you get to see, you know, F1, 2, 3, F1 Academy all at once. And it kind of, guess, it's good because I think it gives them younger drivers more exposure to just like average fans who, I mean, in America, they don't even show it on, our broadcast television. You have to already kind of be a racing fan to even get access to watch it. So hopefully it can kind of boost interest in like the lower formula experience.
Yeah, I think it'll definitely be cool. I was just like looking at to see if they had something going on in Canada when I go next year, but it looks like they won't because it'll be definitely something nice to like pass the time and like get exposed to the new drivers. And like as Hannah mentioned earlier, Amy, like we can like definitely like follow a driver from like ground zero and like see how they develop, how they grow, and like see how they go if they go into like F2 and then eventually, hopefully, into F1. And so it keeps you busy during that day too if you arrive to the Grand Prix or the track like super early to avoid like any traffic or any lines. So just an idea.
I really wish that Formula 3 and Formula 2 raced in the North America region, but they just haven't fully like moved to that. And I wonder if that is cost wise or if it's because of the age of these drivers. But I will say that they actually have a new venue. This is the first year that Formula 3 and Formula 2 will actually be racing at Qatar. Which is very exciting, and it's one of their last races of the season. So I'm interested to see with them racing on a brand new circuit, clean slate, if it brings out any new potential.
I mean, if they could make it all the way to Australia to race, I mean, I feel like they could do one race, like at Coda. Like, I feel like that would be fun. It's an actual established track, it's not a street track. Lots of capacity for fans. I think that would be a perfect like trial run if they wanted to try out, F2, F3 over here in the Americas.
I mean, F1 Academy already is going to be doing a race here this year. So they're proving themselves that they can do it here. So, like, please, if you hear this, please.
Also, if they bring it to America, if they have like a young driver that's like an F3 or F2, they can have like the opportunity to be like exposed here in person to the American fans. And then it can just, I don't know, just bring popularity to that driver, like more support. I don't know. It's just, I guess, more exposure, I guess, to the American fan base if they can see someone start again from the ground up and then like be closer to that driver. I don't know. I just think back to like when Logan had like joined F1 and everyone's just like, oh, okay, whatever, pish posh. But it's like, okay, what if like he was exposed here at like Coda or like somewhere in the Americas in general, people can see that driver and continue on and be a fan.
I think a lot of the young American drivers really only see IndyCar, because that's what races in the States and Canada technically. But maybe, they would think, oh yeah, like F1 is possible for someone from over here. Right now it's just Logan, but who knows what the future can hold, especially, if any American teams join the grid or anything like that. Obviously, F1 is trying to court America when it comes to media and everything. So gaining the interest of just young American drivers to join some of these Road to F1 series would also, I think, be a plus.
Yeah, and now that we've talked a little bit about what the season kind of holds as far as like a calendar year, what are our predictions? I mean, it's really hard for me to be like, oh yeah, every driver is going to stay again because you just never know in these careers. I mean, There's been certain drivers that have skipped F3 or skipped F2 from F3 and gone straight into F1. I mean, there's drivers that have only been in F3 1 year. I mean, it's so hard. But what do y'all think? Who do you think will stay?
I'm going to be very honest and say that I don't know much of the drivers. So this was a fun learning experience for me to learn about F3. But it would be interesting to see like the drivers who skip F2 or skip F3, like how that works out for them. And it's always brings me the question of like the super license points and everything, like how much points, how that works and everything. So maybe one of y'all can explain that, how that could be possible.
I will say it's kind of a little fuzzy because while you have to be a certain age to move to each categories, I mean, excuse my French, but shit happens. They do some crazy shit sometimes. And you just never know until after it's already happened. I mean, silly season is a perfect example of just stuff happening and you don't even know about it till after it's already done. So I actually got the opportunity to interview Jessica Edgar, and her cousin, Johnny Edgar, is actually on the grid or was on the grid this year with MP Motorsports. So my hope is that he gets to move into F2 at least because I do think he deserves it. And like I said already, I'm a little biased because I want him to do good just based off of Jessica herself. But I will be surprised if Gabrielle Bortello will stay in Formula 3. I really think that since he won the championship this year, he'll move it into Formula 2. I mean, he will follow the same stepping stones like Oscar Piastri did, Victor Martins did, and Dennis Hauger. So you just never know who were former world champions or champions of like Formula 3 in the past. So I would be surprised if like he didn't automatically move, but he, like Casey says, he hasn't been picked up by a driver academy yet. So you don't know. You never know.
I think, especially because the F2 season isn't quite over yet, I believe they still have one more race. Once that season's kind of over, I think we might hear more about like what F2 seats are even going to be open next year. Because obviously the F2 champion can't be in F2 anymore, so obviously that seat will be open. But we don't know who's going to be staying in F2 next year yet, and who's going to be leaving. So we don't even know, I guess, how many open spots there even are for F3 drivers or from any other series really to join. So maybe once we get closer to that final race, like silly season is still happening. It's, an eternal time. But hopefully like once, and who knows, someone could retire at the end of the season, pull a Nico, you never know. But I think once we get more clear picture of like what F2's doing, then we can kind of see, I guess, how F3 people filter up into F2.
Yeah, you honestly never know. And to be frankly honest with you, since, like Casey mentioned, F2 hasn't officially ended, we probably won't know anything about what the next year will bring until probably winter and winter break. So once everything kind of wraps up and settles down, quote unquote, settles down, because it never ends. And we'll be able to get more of a clearer picture. I will say I hope that more women get to move into Formula 3, to be frankly honest with you, because I love seeing that and it's a rarity. Let's be frankly honest. Wish it happened more.
So actually, Sophia, the only woman on the grid right now, is actually the first woman to score points in F3. So keep going. I mean, podium next, win next. And hopefully she'll have more women join her at some point and she can continue to climb the ladder, perhaps F2 at some point. That'd be great.
Honestly, I would be interested to see because F1 Academy after CODA, you're not guaranteed to be able to go back to F1 Academy because it's a year by year contract. It's not like a multi-year contract that they sign. I wonder if like we're gonna see some of the girls develop into like F3. So that should be interested to see. I mean, we've got many, many good talented drivers on that grid this year. So love to see kind of where they fall in the future.
Yeah, I was just thinking that like pipeline from like F1 Academy into like F3, if there's like when they were coming up with the academy and everything, if there was like, okay, if one of the drivers from there performs well enough, or whatever the case may be, if they can just like sign for like a different team or that direct team under F3. Like for example, you know how like Prima has the F3 and the F1 Academy. I wonder if there's just something within their contracts like, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, you have a more likely chance, or you will go into F3 or whatever the case may be, depending.
Especially since next year, I believe each of the F1 teams have to kind of sponsor, I guess, one of the F1 Academy drivers. So that might also be helpful in kind of getting them potentially a seat in one of the like F3, F2 teams.
I actually really wonder how that's going to work. So, one of the dominant teams are going to sponsor an F1 Academy driver. How do you make that decision without it being political in someone's career? To be frankly honest with you, very interested to see how they end up working that. Like, this team sponsors this team. Like, so Ferrari sponsors Prema. So, all three drivers on Prema are sponsored by Ferrari, or how they work it in some sorts of that, or they go, you are mine, you are mine, and they do that. So I wonder how that's going to work. I mean, you never know. They surprise us all the time.
So I have a question, and it may be a stupid one, but as teachers say, there's no such thing as a stupid question because I'm just genuinely curious. Because again, I'm learning. So Casey, you had mentioned the champion for the F2 season, they lose their seat. And correct me if I'm wrong. Does the same thing happen to the F3 champion of that year for the following year? They're not guaranteed a seat or whatever.
So I tried to look into this and it wasn't as clear cut. So with F2, it's very clear that like once you win the championship, you can't compete in F2 for like the following year. But in F3, it does not look like that's the case. Like technically, they could. Oh, that is the case.
No, it's not clear. Like, they
Ah,
don't have it in the official FIA
yeah.
regulations, which I did read when I was like coming up with this. And you would think that it would be the same, but it's not. Or at least they don't make it clear. Now, if it happens, it's closed book type of deal.
Yeah, maybe it's because like it's a lot easier to go from F3 to F2 than it is to go from F2 to F1. They're not like you can't stay, but I guess if you after you won, why would you want to stay in F3? I feel like you'd want to progress, move onward. But I mean, it's technically allowed, I think, but I don't know if any drivers have done that. Especially since this whole series has kind of been reworked like a million times into the current Formula 3. I'm not entirely sure. That's definitely something to look into.
If we ever get to talk to a driver one day, that's probably going to be my first question. So I'm going to write that down. And Melissa, we'll figure out the answers.
Whenever the opportunity comes, that's gonna be like the first thing that like I ask and be like, so if you win the F3 championship, can you like do F3 again next year, or do you have to go to F2?
I mean, track record wise, looking back at like the previous champions, most of them have immediately progressed to F2. I mean, Oscar Piastri was the 2020 champion, immediately moved to F2, and then immediately moved to F1 as a reserve driver. So, perfect example of progressing. Gabriel Bortatello is the 2023. So he'll be able to tell us like that stepping stone if he won, he moved F2, or if he stays. I mean, Dennis Hauger won the 2021 champion, moved almost immediately to F2 after. So track record wise, it makes sense, but you never really know because it's not like a written rule in their like regulations book. And now to probably move on to my favorite part of the episode, our pre-outro. And today is going to be a motorsports fun fact of the day. So I'm going to kind of wing this, but a quote I found on motorsports is to remember to go out there and just make an impact. So a lot of time people think that when you go into motorsports, you make an impact, or that you go in there to make money. You don't go in there to really show your talent and everything. But when you look at this quote that says make an impact, it's really telling you to be you and enjoy what you're doing and make an impact on the world. Show who you are to yourself, to the team, to everybody watching. So as you're progressing in motorsports, just remember to be who you want to be. Be who you are, be genuine to yourself, and just enjoy. Have fun.
Now, I don't know about you, but I love getting to learn about a new series, especially a Formula One feeder series. What series should we cover next? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere we are Paddock Girls Podcast, except on Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. As always, don't forget to rate, review, and share the podcast everywhere you listen, from like Apple, Spotify, and now even on TikTok. Thank you for joining us in the paddock. We'll see you next time. Bye, Craig.
Bye, Greg.
Toodaloo, Craig.
Bye, Craig.